Hi, my name is David Muchadło and I will show you how I managed to solve the Intigritis December XSS challenge and how I approached the problem. First of all, I really enjoyed this challenge and I look forward to solving next challenges from Intigriti team. They are just great, and if you have some time, you can solve this challenge right now. You won't win anything, but you will learn something for sure. First thing that I did is I opened the challenge page, and as you can see, there is not a lot of there. There is a calculator you can use, and that's it. When I approach some challenge or new application, I just try to use the application or how it was designed to be used. I just want to understand what is happening. Okay, so we have a calculator. Let's say we want to add 1 plus 2 and we got 3. We can clear the output. We can multiply. So first thing you can notice is when you click a number, the URL at the top changes. So when we click 5, then we click plus. At the top you can see the parameter name num1 has value 8 and parameter operator has value %2b, which is, as you can see, it's a plus. Yeah, and we clicked the plus. Our first thoughts are the number we click and the operation are reflected in the URL. And what will happen if we enter the numbers we want to add or we want to operate on, and we refresh the page? Will it stay the same or it stayed the same? So it means that the application keeps its state in the URL parameters. For us hackers, it's really good sign because the goal of the challenge is to find XSS, and we have to find ways of controlling some input data. And one way of doing that is parameters from URL. So right now we can dive into code and understand it even more. So we open the source of the page and we can go to the bottom because there is not much up there in the top. It's not interesting for us. We have our challenge section and our script. We can open that. The better approach is to inspect the page. You can go to the page, right click and click inspect. And you can see there are a lot of tabs. The tab that is interesting for us is sources. It's a place where you can view what resources are loaded by every domain. So we are under the challenge 1220 intigriti.io. There is our subdomain, and we know that there is a script loaded from that subdomain, and we can open that. It's the script.js. Code here is highlighted and is easily readable. So we will use that and try to understand the code more in the editor. So let's start from the top. There are a couple of functions. There is some function calc. There is init function. Init is probably something that is called at the beginning. There is a get query variable. And there are a lot of more functions, but as you can see, there is a comment. The code below is calculator UI and it's not a part of challenge. So it's pretty good for us because we don't have to waste a lot of time trying to find bugs in these functions. Set numbers, set operator, and clear. We can just focus on these 3 functions. I'm not saying that we shouldn't understand what the other functions do. The better understanding you have, the better bugs you will find. In the JavaScript, there are some events. For example, there is onload event, which is called when the page loads. When all the resources are loaded, when the HTML is rendered, then the window onload is called. And we have a couple of things that are happening here. It is like our first function that will be called in our application. When the page loads, we will call the init function. It's the function we saw at the top. So it's probably part of the challenge too. Then we set up some listeners on buttons. It's not important what actually happens there, but the thing to note is the JavaScript code will listen on clicks that are made to buttons. When someone clicks the number button, which is from 0 to 9, then the setNumber function will be called with the inner text, which means the 9 from the button will be passed as a parameter to this function, and this function will just create a URL object, get values of numbers from the URL. The getQuery variable function does that. We'll get deeper into that in a moment. And there's some logic that is not that interesting for us. The set operator will do the same thing, the similar thing. And at the end, we have the clear function that is only attached to the clear button, and it will clear the parameters from the URL. As I said, the init function is called first. So let's dive deeper into that function. What it does. We have some div result and we are passing a value to it. We use the calc function to calculate the result from two numbers and operator, which are taken from the URL. And the function that is responsible for getting the parameters is here. And we will dive deeper into that function later. We have to know that it only returns the value of the parameter. The next interesting function for us is the calc function, which accepts two numbers and the operator. The operator is being decoded. We create some operation here, and as you can see at the end, there's a eval function. But before that, we have some checks that will prevent us from executing any code. So the thing you have to know about XSSs, the DOM XSSs, is you have to identify things and sources. Source is a place which we can control, and the value from the source is passed to the thing. Thing is a place which takes the input and it puts it into the DOM, or it evals it. So as I said before, can control the parameters. For example, we can set num1 to 5, and if we reload the page, you can see that we have the 5 number here. So our source is parameters from the URL, the parameter num1, num2 and operator. And our thing is eval, which will lead us to some XSS potentially. So we have to find a connection between a source and thing. The thing we can do is we can set some breakpoints in the sources tab to understand what is actually happening there. There are a couple of places that are interesting for us. First, we'll set a breakpoint in the calc function by clicking on the number. We want to stop execution when we are into this function. So we'll 5, which will stop at the beginning. And also we are interested in what is actually passed to the eval function. We would also like to understand the getQuery variable function. So we'll set a breakpoint here. Okay, so what I will do is set some parameters in the URL, num1 and num2. And also we want the operator, but we have to encode the class and it's %2b. So it's what I wrote there. And now we can hit enter and the page is reload. We are in init function. And the next function, we can step into function. The next function that will be called is the getQuery variable with the num1 passed as a parameter to this function. So first, it grabs the parameters from URL as a string and it creates a variable in window object with them, and there, as you can see, it's the string from URL. Then it splits the parameters by ampersand, and we have values here. We have an array of parameters. Next we parse them, and it's done by just iterating over that array, and we check if the current pair name is what we are looking for. For our case it's num1, and if it is, then we get the value from it. We can step out of this function, and we can skip that because the getQuery variable will be called 2 times more, because it is called for every parameter, so we can skip that. And we are into the calc function. So as you can see, we have parameters passed to this calc function, and it is 5, 1 and plus. So we can see what operation is created, and the operation is passed to the value of some div or some input, and then we check if the operator, for us it's a plus, is in this array. So the operator has to be plus, minus, or slash, or star, or equal sign. If it's not, it will throw an error and we won't get the eval. Then we test the num1 and num2. Here are the regexes, and they are pretty hard to understand. So we can use regexer, which is a website where you can copy a regex, paste, and it will show in a pretty easy to understand way what the regex does, or what can the string contain in it. In our case, the string can contain from 0 to 9, from A to Z, and A to Z uppercase, and also there is a dash you are allowed to use. So this is the first regex that is used on num1, and also there is a second regex, and the second regex is the same as first regex, but you can't use the dash. As you can see, there is the difference. It means that we cannot simply pass easy XSS there, and there are like some constraints we have to keep in mind. So also the operation, which is the everything combined together, cannot have more characters than 20, so it won't be that easy to create these XSS. We can try, for example, to put there not a number, but let's say we'll put there a letter. I will resume it, and in the console you will see A is not defined, which means that, and it comes from the eval. So it means that A is treated as variable name, and when we go to the source tab and we only leave the operation here, the operation we are trying to eval is A plus 1, and A will be treated as a variable, but A doesn't exist, so it will fail. The question we should ask ourselves is what we can do with it. As I said before, we can only use this operator. One thing that can come to your mind is we can use the equal sign to assign something. We can, for example, we have to encode the equal sign, and we will assign A equals 1. I will refresh the page and you can see A equals 1. So when we run the code, there is no error. And right now there exists a variable in the Windows scope with our value. So we can assign anything to anything. It's first thing that will allow us to solve this challenge. The second thing that is also important is there's a bug in the getQuery variable. I will show you what is the bug. Let's say there's some hash at the end of the URL, and we will add it, the hash and sign at the end, and we will refresh the page. So we want to get the num1 variable from the parameters, and we create the query string, and as you can see, there is the whole query and the hash at the end. And what the code does, it splits all the parameters by ampersand, and then it iterates over every variables it got, and it also split the variable by equal sign, and it will get the pair. The pair with index 0 will be the name of the pair, for example the num1, and the pair index 1 will be the value of it. What I wanted to show you is we can actually add there num1 after the hash, and the value of it will be returned from this function, because for loop here does not stop at first of occurrence of the num1 variable. It will get the last one. Let's resume it and refresh the page. Okay, here we go again. As you can see, our vars is the array. The first element is the parameter, second is also parameter operator, and the third one is our num1, which is actually not a URL parameter, but it's in the hash. We will step into this for loop. We will get the pair, and as you can see, the first pair is num1 and a, and it will check if the pair with index 0 is the variable we are looking for. If it is, we will assign the value, and we'll iterate to the end of the array, which means the value we are returning will be 2. Why is it so important that we found the bug in the query parsing function? You can actually change the hash of the page and the page won't reload. It is pretty important for us because we'll have to find a way to change the parameters and not reload the page. It will be important in later stage, but for now I will go further with the first thing we found, which is we can assign anything to anything. So let's say we want to change our calc function that is here to, for example, eval. And what will happen? So we are here in the get query variable. We want to see what is our operation, and I will resume the script. The operation we did here is we assign the eval to calc, which means after it's evaluated, next time you calc, it will be actually eval. We'll go to the operation, and as you can see, we can do that, and it's evaluated. And right now, calc is eval. So when we say, for example, alert1, the code will be executed. So the calc function is used in init, and it's used only once here. So when we change the calc to what we need, we actually won't call it again. The exploit won't work and will not have XSS, but we have to find another pair of functions we can assign that will be useful for us. There is an event that is called on hash change, and it's called every time. I will show you, and I will add there a hash, and it is being called every the hash changes. We can assign an init function to that on hash change. So num1 will be on hash change and num2 will be init. So what we did here, I will resume the script. What we did here is we will call the init function. I will set a breakpoint here, change the hash. The init function will be called, as you can see, it's called because we had hit the breakpoint. But we can change the hash and the page won't reload. Values that are passed to the calc function are still the same. I told you before that we can actually add parameters to the hash, and because of the parsing error, we can add new parameters without reloading the page. So first we change the on hash change to init, and now want to change the calc. We want the num2 equals eval, and we resume the script. And right now the last step of exploit is just calling the alert1 in the num1, because right now when we change the hash again, the init will be called, but our calc function is actually eval. So the first argument it gets, which is the num1, will be the code that will be executed. So if we again change the hash of the page and add the num1 equals to, for example, alert1, it will be executed. So we almost solved the challenge, but we want to create a proof of concept that won't require any user interaction. Another thing that is pretty important is when we go to the network tab and click on the first request and go to the headers, and when you look at the response headers, you can see that the page is missing X frame option, which means the page can be embedded on another page. We can put the page into iframe. So first we have to create an iframe with our page. I will copy that, and we have to delete everything after the hash, and we'll add the attribute ID to it, frame. So because of the same origin policy, we cannot access the iframe and read anything from it, but we can change the hash of the iframe without reloading it. We can console log to see if it works, and we'll run the code, get the element by ID, we run it, and okay, it works. As we can see, we see the frame element. So we can open the inspect tool. Here's our iframe, and we can change the, okay, we have the breakpoints in the iframe. Let's save the source. Source equals the string we are starting with, and it's important to leave the ampersand at the end. It's for the parsing back. So we want to add the hash at the end. Source, it will be the source plus this, okay. And we want to add the num1 equals, so as we did before, we want to assign the on hash change to init, and then we want to assign the calc function to eval. Calc and num2 equals eval. And after that, we want to change the hash, but we want to only execute the script, which is our content. So as you can see, it worked. If we create a page with script and we send the script to someone else, if clicks on the page, we will trigger the XSS on the Intigriti challenge. It is no interaction XSS, and it was solved intended way. So yeah, that's all. Thank you guys and girls for watching. I really appreciate your time, and see you on my streams. Bye.